Hello there, good evening, and welcome back to part 2 of Tcheslaw Tchekhovich's recollections of Gurdjieff, A Master in Life. And I hope that you enjoyed part 1 yesterday, which involved pretty much just the introductory material, the preface, forward, and then Tcheslaw Tchekhovitch documented his first meeting with Mr. Gurdjieff, and then talked about young Alexis, who was having some dietary problems, and then finally the first cold shower. And I think today, if we can, we'll try and finish the section from Constantinople, and that will leave us, when we come back on Sunday, to move on to the memories of the Priory, which will be lovely. And within this section that we're going to read this evening, there is like a subsection, a mini-series, if you like, under the title A New Way of Thinking, with several chapters or several subsections, a discussion about food, hypnotism and hypnosis, very interesting, the demands of the way, the inner prison, and religion. So all very interesting, informative, and full of knowledge and wisdom for us to take away into our daily lives. And I'll just say hello to everyone. Hi there, Zach. I hope you're okay and feeling energized. Hi there, David. Jordan, nice to see you. Melissa and Stephen. Good evening, everyone, and anyone else watching and listening who has yet to say hello, feel free to do so. We're a friendly bunch, and as I always do, just for try not to make it mechanical, but if you're looking forward to all of this, perennial philosophy, fourth way, the mini-series on internal and external considering, and Maurice Nichols' commentaries, as I always do, remind you, if you wouldn't mind, like the video, subscribe to the channel, share the show with all your like-minded friends and family members on your social media. But for now, enough of all that nonsense. Now, they're not numbered, these chapters, but I believe we're at chapter 5, aren't we? That's what I've put in the thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Chapter 5, An Entertaining Memory. Sleight of hand and the skill of jugglers had always fascinated me. At 12 years old, I wouldn't miss for anything in the world even one of the evening shows given by jugglers in our own town. One day I plucked up enough courage to introduce myself to one of the performers whose feats were loudly proclaimed on the posters. At first I sensed that he wanted to put me off. Then, touched by my look of disappointment, he invited me to dinner. He must have seen qualities in me that could be useful to him, because he soon made me his assistant. As a result, I nearly ended up as a professional conjurer, a job that all but destroyed my romantic illusions about this kind of entertainment. However, I never quite lost my conviction that truly miraculous powers do exist. In fact, my interest became even stronger when I saw certain feats being performed, for instance, the ability of some people to demonstrate an extraordinary memory. No tricks are possible there, I told myself. This gift seemed like a miracle, and I was determined that one day I would possess a memory like that myself. Events came and went. War, revolution, and finally my meeting with Mr. Gurdjieff in Constantinople. Encouraged by his interest in my work at the Institute, I confided in him my fascination with the psychic faculties of man, mostly still unexplored. He asked me which one I would particularly like to develop. Memory, I replied. Oh, hello there, Sophia. Hello and welcome. Memory, Tcheslaw Tchekhovitch wants to develop. Georgy Ivanovitch smiled and calmly lit a cigarette. Then he explained that there were many kinds of memory, but that at my particular stage of development I could only manage one: entertainment memory. He added that he would teach me how to develop this type of memory on condition that I would apply myself and take advantage of any opportunity that arose. For some time I thought he had forgotten his promise, and I was afraid to remind him. However, one day when we were alone together, he gave me an exercise. While he did so, I was struck by his detached and relaxed manner, which I would become more familiar with later. He told me to let him know when I succeeded. 2 days later I managed it and was ready to be tested. He then gave me another exercise. This is not the place to elaborate on the exercises. It is enough to say that Georgy Ivanovitch explained the laws of mnemonics to me in detail. After several months of practice, I could perform several tricks. For instance, I invited members of my audience to suggest words in different languages and assign a number to each word. When I had a list of 100 or so, I'd have someone read the list just once, but not in a numerical order. For example, the reader might say 67 electricity, 18 miracle, 42 thank you, 33 dzvadzruti, and so on. Then someone would ask me which word corresponded to which number, or vice versa. I'd give the right answer every time. People were amazed at my ability to repeat long series of words corresponding to numbers in ascending or descending order. Later, I improved my act. By now, I was able to memorize the faces of the people giving me the different words with their corresponding numbers, and soon learned to put scrambled sequences of words back in their correct order. With mastery of the principles given me by Georgy Ivanovitch, and thanks to an additional exercise, I was able to perform the following. So here's his feats of memory, Tcheslaw. On a blackboard, someone from the audience would write 8 numbers, each with 8 digits. Each number was written one above the other, making a square. This was hidden from me. Someone else would then indicate a row or column, and I would recite the whole sequence it contained. Also, given any coordinate in the square, for example, 3rd column, 4th row, I could identify the corresponding number and state how often it appeared. Finally, without a moment's thought, I could say how often any number recurred. The audience was even more thrilled when I managed these feats while engaged in an activity requiring manual dexterity, or even while dancing. Clearly no trickery was involved, and I could equally well give the correct answer anywhere, anytime. This was nothing more than a cabaret act, but people naively credited me with supernatural powers. I insisted, however, that it was merely an exercise in mnemonics. Taken to the limit, certainly, but still based on simple logic. And yes, it's always association, isn't it? That's how the mind works, and how my mind works, especially when I'm reading and, willing to share. There is a wonderful book on mnemonics. It's called Moonwalking with Einstein, I believe is the name, and it follows people, the memory championships, I think, memory world championships. And in the book, he lays out very clearly, very simply, how one can remember. They call it a memory palace, is the what the modern mnemonists use. And by using a memory palace and sort of formulating some characters or objects or whatever you would be able to remember easiest, you can essentially remember the order of a pack of playing cards. I've never done it myself. I've never put the effort in to enhance my memory skills, my mnemonic skills, but I believe it can be done. Like I said, I've read this random book, Moonwalking with Einstein. And here Tcheslaw Tchekhovitch is telling us his own memories of his memory palace. So, the next chapter. From dream to reality. It was 1921. I had been in Constantinople for about a year, and I was certain that Russia was living through a bad dream that could not last. If not tomorrow, it would perhaps end in a month, 2 months, a year, but eventually everything would have to return to normal. Calm would prevail. We could return to our homes and take up our lives again, not quite as they had been, of course, but perhaps we could find a new way of living based on principles of real justice and mutual understanding among the different classes of society. I don't remember having discussed this with Ouspensky, but the hope of soon returning to Russia was alive and deeply rooted in each of us. At that time, I believe, the last pocket of white Russian resistance in the Crimea had not yet been eliminated, and Tsarist money was still being traded on the market. The Russian emigrants followed these events day by day, and everyone was consumed by the fever that dominated the Constantinople Stock Exchange. Some got rid of their rubles, even while complaining about the foreign businessmen who, they felt, were exploiting their misfortune by buying at a very low price. Others, who had already earned a little Turkish money, were happy to buy large quantities of Tsarist bills with the idea of acquiring property on their return to Russia. I too began to make money, and one day, as I was passing a foreign exchange office, I was astonished to see a pile of Tsarist banknotes in large denominations offered at the ridiculously low price of a few Turkish pounds. What idiots, I thought. It's a fortune. In Russia I'll be rich. But it's too easy. Perhaps I shouldn't. And yet, to think that my parents dreamt of selling their bonds and making a 200,000 ruble profit. Now their dream will come true. I have the 200,000 rubles. With this thought, I entered the exchange office and snatched up my small fortune. When I arrived at Mr. Gurdjieff's house at 35 Yemenidji Street, I was so overjoyed that he asked me with his usual composure, "What are you so happy about, Tchekhovitch?" "I met these idiots, Georgy Ivanovitch." "And so?" "For a mere 3 Turkish pounds, I acquired more than 200,000 rubles. Do you realize, Georgy Ivanovitch, what a fortune this will be when we return to Russia?" I see now how naive I must have appeared, and I understand why Mr. Gurdjieff didn't dare shatter all my insane hopes at once. He was very kind all through lunch, and several times he even called me Moneybags. Moneybags. At first I took him seriously, and, inflated with my own importance, I felt truly rich. But each time he called me Moneybags, I sensed the irony, and became more and more uncertain. Still, it was difficult for me to jump from blind confidence to abject doubt. However, doubt won out, and I finally took the risk of asking, "Georgy Ivanovitch, from what you seem to be saying, perhaps I've made a mistake. Could all these banknotes really be worthless?" "They do have value, but not what you think." "But you wouldn't have bought them?" "Yes, in fact, I'm looking for some to buy, and I would be happy to buy yours too, but only when they cost half the price of wallpaper. I would like to paper the walls with them." I knew that even when he was joking, there was an element of truth in what he said. Trying hard to contain my emotions, I replied, "Russia can't disappear. Money can't become worthless. What do you say to that? Where is my mistake?" "Your reasoning, Tcheslaw, is sound. There is only one thing that you are not taking into account. The Russia that you knew no longer exists, and will not exist for a long time to come. So what's to be done?" "Prepare to live abroad for a very long time." His response, like a shock, produced in me an awareness of reality. I have often relived this abrupt moment of awakening. I still wonder how Mr. Gurdjieff could have had yet again such a clear vision of how events would unfold. And it's a theme, isn't it, across the Hartmann's memoir and now Tchekhovich's recollections, which cover the same time period, that even though the world is in chaos, turmoil and war, Gurdjieff had this perception, had escaped the law of accident and was able to keep everyone safe. So it shows the potential and the possibilities. And hello there, Willem Van der Kooj, I think that's how you pronounce it, but we'll just stick with Willem, I think, who says, what an interesting, mysterious psychology. And yes, if you're new to Gurdjieff, you're in for a treat because it's far more than mere psychology, I would argue. So yeah, have a little browse around the channel. As always, I'd suggest In Search of the Miraculous, the place to begin. Or my own writing, actually. I don't talk about this enough. I shouldn't I? I have my own book. It's called Awakening the Machine, Gurdjieff Today. You can find it on Amazon. The link's in the description. And maybe that's the place to start. And then In Search of the Miraculous. And hello there, Laurie. Laurie, it's lovely to see you. Happy New Year to you, my friend. And I hope that you're well and welcome. These are, it's a lovely little book. You can pick up any chapter any way you like, to be honest. And here we are with a new way of thinking. When Ouspensky was in Constantinople, he stayed on Principo, an island in the Bosphorus. His pupils met there regularly, and Mr. Gurdjieff often attended these meetings. He would enter discreetly, then quietly follow the conversation, listening attentively while observing us closely. When he intervened, it was always unexpected. One day, after a long silence, he shook his head and, making a gesture with his hand, said, "All that, it's just philosophy." "Isn't philosophy useful?" someone asked. "Yes, philosophy can be very useful, but only up to a point, and then only if it's actual philosophy in the proper sense of the word. Unfortunately, what you are doing is just pouring from the empty into the void." "But Georgy Ivanovitch, what should we do?" "Do? It has already been said that man in his ordinary state can do nothing. However, he can try to observe and notice what is actually happening in him. Only such observations can lead to real understanding, and understanding is the threshold of real doing." He then asked us to tell him of our discoveries, our little Americas, he called them. Our observations were showing us the force of mechanicalness in all our manifestations, even the smallest. At the same time, we were led to see what he called the wrong functioning of the centers of the human machine. Our illusions about ourselves collapsed one after another, but at the same time we had glimpses of a new level of consciousness, different from what we had previously known. Mr. Gurdjieff began to join in our conversations more often. He showed us in subtle ways either the authenticity or the abnormality of various aspects of human behavior. The following recollections are from this period. So we have, like I was mentioning in the intro at the beginning, we have several little subsections on these new ways of thinking. And the first one is about a discussion about food. One day, Mr. Gurdjieff arrived in the midst of a lively debate in which the vegetarians in our group were fiercely defending their cause. Among them was Madame N., the wife of a banker. Actually, this lady was not a vegetarian. She could not stop talking and involved herself in everything in order to be noticed. She never missed an opportunity to show off her eccentric opinions or defend ideas that she thought were highly original. "Georgy Ivanovitch," she said, "it really isn't necessary to kill animals to feed ourselves, is it? Can't we live perfectly well on grains, milk, fruit, and vegetables?" "Yes," Mr. Gurdjieff replied, "it is quite possible because everything required for the physical and spiritual life of man can be found in the vegetable kingdom." Madame N. was radiant. "You see," she said to the others, "I was right." "Yes," Mr. Gurdjieff added, "you would be right if our human existence was limited only to the spiritual, but it isn't. Meat is necessary when there is hard physical work to be done, or in a very cold climate, or when edible plants cannot be found. Besides, our canine teeth, as well as other biological characteristics, show that our digestive system has been adapted by nature to assimilate meat. Animal flesh provides all the substances we need, both for the intensive working of our organism and for maintaining a normal temperature in cold climates. So you are right, and at the same time, you are not right. I particularly like such moments when, with an objectivity infused with tolerance, Mr. Gurdjieff widened the perspective of our exchanges. Hypnotism and hypnosis. In my youth, I was passionately interested in hypnotism. I tried to practice it, but with uncertain results. I did succeed in hypnotizing people, but not always in correctly bringing my experimental subjects back. The power of hypnosis intrigued me, and I really thought I could help people by using it. Boasting a little, I told Mr. Gurdjieff about some of these experiments. In reply, he spoke at length about the danger I had been to those who took part in my experiments. This led me suddenly to have serious doubts about what I had done. He explained to me that another even more dangerous kind of hypnosis exists, under which all men live their ordinary state. He made me understand that it was under this very hypnotic influence that I myself had behaved so irresponsibly. It is because men do not wish to liberate themselves from this hypnotic state of sleep in which they live that they can so easily be hypnotized, he said. That is why their psyche is subject to that terrible disease called suggestibility. Dehypnotize yourself, Tchekhovitch. Only then will you be able to help others. And we could just take out the name Tchekhovitch, couldn't we? And sort of, excuse me, use it for our own dehypnotize him. Dehypnotize yourself. Only then will you be able to help others. The demands of the way. Another time we were speaking about schools in the traditional sense, that is, about the different ways Ouspensky would later describe in his book, In Search of the A thumbs down? What's happened there? Sorry, the thumbs down has distracted me, so I'll try again. The demands of the way. Another time we were speaking about schools in the traditional sense, that is, about the different ways Ouspensky would later describe in his book, In Search of the Miraculous. What should the attitude of a pupil be in a school, one of us asked. The attitude of a pupil is judged according to each individual and is not necessarily always the same, replied Mr. Gurdjieff. To say that something is objectively good or bad, right or wrong, can only be true in relation to a particular case. What is most important is that the pupil develops those qualities and makes it possible for him to maintain the necessary attitude. An allegory can perhaps help you grasp the qualities that are really required and the subtle principles on which the work of a school is based. Only those who understand, who can accept and undergo the conditions I am going to describe, will be able to go further. Imagine you are in a vast virgin forest. In a clearing there is an isolated house far from anywhere. You are given the opportunity to live there in complete freedom. There is just one condition. You are asked to maintain a certain substance at the boiling point in a cauldron which is firmly set over a fire. You don't know anything about this substance. One of your duties is to get wood from the forest to feed the fire. The boiling must not stop at any price. No one is checking on you. You don't even know whether someone will come to relieve you. Nothing is certain. However, you have to hold out. The result you obtain will depend on your perseverance, on your rigour, on the honesty with which you undertake the task, which no one verifies except yourself. Besides, no one has the least interest in either encouraging or discouraging you. Well, would you be able to accomplish such a task for an indefinite time, and without trying to find out what is boiling in the cauldron, however intrigued you might be by the question? What is more, the lid of the cauldron, even though it is easily lifted, must not be moved. Naturally, many of us thought it did not make sense to undertake this blindly, to waste one's time, go to all that trouble without knowing in advance what all that might produce. George Ivanovitch listened patiently to our objections and perplexities. "I have no doubt that you are sincere," he said, "but you need to understand that to be able to bear the difficulties of a situation so foreign to our reason, you must have already been prepared by life itself." None of us dared ask questions about this preparation acquired in the course of life, which could allow one to surmount so many temptations, including laziness, curiosity, doubt, and the whole gamut of uncontrollable reactions. Much later I began to suspect what this mysterious alchemical substance might be, and why it requires such sacrifice to obtain the gifts it bestows. The inner prison. When Gurdjieff arrived at our meetings, he was usually smiling, but we knew beforehand that, after hearing our observations, he would surely show his displeasure. One day, however, it was just the opposite. He had entered with a sombre air, but when one of us began to speak of the state he had experienced at the moment he seriously undertook the exercise suggested for the day, Mr. Gurdjieff began to look at him attentively, and his face brightened into a smile. From that moment on, our companion continued, a strange state took hold of me, a state in which I felt I could no longer perceive what I was doing, in which I felt ashamed that I couldn't really do what I had decided, in which I realized that I had given myself a number of good reasons for not really living something which nevertheless I had felt to be. He stopped, then continued, "To be an experience. No, it is not an experience." Someone suggested, "More like a task?" "No," he replied. From that moment on, that's it. It no longer was a task for me. All I could recall was that I was supposed to be doing a task. However, when I had first tried it, when I had felt the need to live the experience, it really was a task. But when later I tried to do it, my decision seemed to have no weight, no importance. The meaning of the task was gone. My ordinary state had gotten the better of me. There followed an animated conversation, during which someone said that the moment when one clearly sees one's state is similar to what a prisoner must feel. Listening to us as he smoked, Mr. Gurdjieff smiled with satisfaction. I do not remember exactly when he joined our conversation, but I remember well that he spoke humorously about how prisoners might react to their situation. Sometimes a prisoner, crushed by his situation, becomes embittered, withdraws into himself, and, full of resentment, spends all his time pitying himself and dreaming of his lost youth. Another looks out for the least hope, the smallest ray of light, and ceaselessly prays in order to recover his freedom. A third lives in the hope that his sentence will be reduced, and to be well liked by his jailers. He becomes obsequious and even an informer. I knew some sorry prisoners, Mr. Gurdjieff continued, who brought up 3 generations of spiders, which they succeeded in taming and even teaching tricks. Another became friends with mice and rats, and still another shared his bread with sparrows. Each of these prisoners looked for a way of adapting to his condition and finding a means to escape, not from the prison, but from himself. But only the one who sees that he is imprisoned in himself has a chance of freedom, that is, if he really desires it and is intelligently prepared. One needs to think very carefully and see who is in prison and what the prison consists of. During the following weeks, Mr. Gurdjieff spoke to us about what he called the inner prison and about the long process of liberation or awakening to oneself. And the final section of this little chapter is on religion. Another day, when Mr. Gurdjieff arrived, we were speaking of all the various religions. This time he joined in our conversation almost at once, saying, There are not 3, not 20, not even 2 religions. There is simply religion. As for the rest, you can call them what you like. The study of holy scriptures, the teachings of theological principles, ritual practices, the church or the community of believers. But don't call any of that religion. True religion is always and everywhere the same. It is one and unique. Hey, thanks, Willem. You're in the right place, I feel, if you feel that way. So, yeah, this is the 4 ideals in a nutshell, ultimately. True religion is always and everywhere the same. It is one and unique. A long silence greeted this strong statement until one of us ventured to disagree. I cannot consider religions such as Orthodox Christianity, Catholicism, or Protestantism as being one and the same religion because they have always been constantly in conflict with each other. This is true, replied Mr. Gurdjieff. I cannot accept or even imagine that at the heart of religion there is any division or conflict whatsoever. The name of religion is given today to a sect that yesterday was regarded as heretical. This reply perplexed us, and no one said a word. The silence was finally broken by one of the most astute among us. I understand the sense of your reply, Georgy Ivanovitch, he began, and I see that you are right. But we are talking of different religions, for example, Islam, Buddhism, Judaism and Christianity. They are different in their rites, their forms, and also their essential nature. Yes, there are big differences, Mr. Gurdjieff agreed. Exactly, was the reply. So in that case, shouldn't we speak not of religion, but of religions? Tell me, asked Mr. Gurdjieff, in your opinion, what is the most important thing about a religion, whichever it may be? Is it the rite, the form, or its essential nature? I do not remember his reply, but I do remember that Mr. Gurdjieff then spoke to us about the nature of religion. The essence of all the religions you've mentioned is the same, affirmed Mr. Gurdjieff. Fundamentally, they are all concerned with only one thing, evolution. The teaching of each great master enables his pupils to follow a certain evolutionary path and to arrive at a level where contact with the highest cosmic force becomes possible. At their root, all the teachings are one and the same, each having as its purpose to help us attain this possibility. Well then, why do they seem to be so different? Someone else asked. It's true they do appear to be different, but their fundamental nature is not. If you want to understand why their appearance is different, the following metaphor may help. Imagine that a rabbit is shown to several people, and each is asked to write a description so that there could be no doubt as to which animal it is, the only rule being never to use the word rabbit. People begin to write, but instead of giving them 3 hours, let's say this is the time necessary to complete their descriptions, the papers are collected after only 20 minutes. If all these descriptions are read in front of an audience who knows nothing about how they came to be written, they will find it difficult to understand that they are hearing descriptions of one and the same animal. It is almost certain that no 2 listeners will have formed an image of the same thing, a rabbit. One might see a kangaroo, another a rat, the third a hare, a fourth might see a mule or an ass or even a dog. All that will depend on how each description begins. One writer might begin by saying that it is a vertebrate, and so all the vertebrates in the world will appear to the listeners as a possible choice. Another starts by saying it is a rodent, and all rodents appear as possibilities. A third will begin by describing the colour of the animal, or by giving its measurements. Another will say it is warm-blooded, or will speak of its food, while another will evoke its cry, its paws, the way it runs, it looks, or even its relation with human beings. In short, each will begin his description with the aspect that is easiest for him to write about, and so the listener will see a different animal in each description. An uninformed man faces exactly the same situation with teachings transmitted by the founders of what you call different religions. You are all speaking now as if you've only heard the beginning of the descriptions, where they seem most different. But beyond a certain point, all these religions converge and constitute one sole religion. One of us then said, I believe I understand you, George Ivanovitch, when you speak of sects and when you give us the metaphor of the rabbit. But the great religions which our friend mentioned exist as a whole. They are not beginnings of a description. Each is presented as a unity, although they appear to be quite different. The difference is only apparent, replied Mr. Gurdjieff, and this contradiction arises from several factors. People who judge a religion in this way have not penetrated the essence of the teaching, and their judgments are bound to be superficial. Religions are actually like mathematics. It is the elementary part, the most exoteric that is offered to the masses, and this elementary part differs according to the religion. It is because a Messiah or messenger from above appears among people who differ in language, philosophical outlook, character, fundamental mentality, and many other temporal aspects, that he has to adapt to the times and choose an appropriate way to accomplish his task. You have already understood, haven't you, one important thing? Man is not one. He is a multitude of numerous impulses and motivations that continually manifest in him. We nodded our heads, acknowledging this truth that most of us had grasped by now. Well, Mr. Gurdjieff continued, if the messenger chooses mastery of the body as his starting point, his emphasis will be placed on what we call the way of the fakir. If the Messiah considers that his task will be fulfilled through feeling, we will see the development of the way of the monk. To use the Christian language, if the master relies on the divine impulse of love or of charity, the way will consist of specific work. Perfected and highest form will be the unique teaching of Christ. If, on the other hand, because of the culture of the time, he trusts that it will be through reason, the intellectual function, that he will be able to bring true ideas to life, it will lead to what we call the way of the yogi. Excuse me. There also exists a fourth way, based on the sacred impulse emanating from conscience, of which a germ is deposited in each human being. This way leads to another specific form of teaching, a new approach to religion. You have agreed, he continued, that in the description of the rabbit, a reading limited to the beginning would inevitably produce confusion. Even as a rabbit has many aspects from which one could begin its description, so religion presents an infinite range of starting points. Think especially of the real difficulty of escaping from the simplistic reductionism of ordinary so-called rational thought. Anyone would have to admit that almost no one knows the true essence of his own religion, yet everyone believes he can judge all the others. He then finished the meeting with the following words: only he who has succeeded by persistent and conscious efforts in freeing himself from the chaos resulting from his own lack of consciousness can be aware of what religion really means. Such intense moments spent with Mr. Gurdjieff opened us up to a deeper questioning about religion and led us to approach traditional teachings with a new sensitivity. And sorry to do this to you all, but I think we're going to leave it there and maybe have a discussion about that final section. Making few videos on the channel about in the Four Ideals playlist speaking about religion, and I plan to and have been planning to for some time, but I have a bit of resistance to it, to share a video about the timeline of religious scriptures. And I have thought about it quite a lot, and I'll just share it with you here. Like I say, I had forgotten that chapter, from Tcheslaw Tchekhovitch about religion, but I know I've read it many years ago when I first read the book, and it's obviously impressed upon me in my subconscious, because this is, in a sense, my view of religion now, that Gurdjieff, in that analogy, uses the concept of a rabbit. And if you, again, I've just read it, but if you're trying to describe a rabbit to someone, not only will the individual attempting to describe it be writing strange things down, but the person trying to interpret it will associate a different thing with what the person's written down. So again, we're back to the confusion of tongues from the Tower of Babel. But in my video that I plan to do, I'm imagining a video here, which is rather strange, but I do plan to record it. We will begin in Egypt. Egypt is the oldest scripture, if you like, and they're the hieroglyphs in the pyramids and the temples. And then you move into Mesopotamia with the cuneiform and the Epic of Gilgamesh, I believe. And then we weave our way through. I'm not going to do the whole video here because that would defeat the object. I won't need to do the video, but then we weave along. And there's multiple currents in the Middle East with the Abrahamic faiths, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Then in the Indian subcontinent, we have the Mahabharata. Then before that, the Upanishads. Before that, the Vedas. Then in, China, we have Taoism, Confucianism. And then later on, we have Islam. Islam is the youngest of all of the world's religions. And my metaphor that I will be using in this video is, in a sense, quite similar, but not. If you can visualize to yourself a white light going through a prism, and it, sort of branching out into, in fact, let me see, it may it's going to be terrible for a second, but I'm sure I can I bring it up while we're live? I don't know. No, I'll save it for the thing, but I'm sure you can visualize a prism, a light going into the prism and refracting or reflecting or whatever the term might be. And in my opinion, the white light is a sea influence or the divine or God or heaven. And then it hits the prism, which could be considered the earth. And depending on the time, the space, the geographic locality, and all of these other factors that go in, these religions, they take a different form. But essentially, if you're looking at the different colors, the different lights that come out of the prism, then you're focusing again on the description of the rabbit, not the rabbit itself, which would be the white light. But anyway, that was a short digression, and apologies for an abrupt ending, but I keep yawning and I'm rather tired. Had a busy day, but not making excuses. Maybe I am, but we'll be back on Sunday, I think, for the next few sections, and then we'll arrive at the Priory, and it'll be very interesting to hear Tcheslaw Tchekhovich's recollections of life at the Priory and how they sort of map against the De Hartmans and also Fritz Peters, which we have read previously. So, yeah, you're all very welcome. Laurie, nice to see you, and I hope life's treating you well. It's always a pleasure, as I say, to share this time with you. I'll only apologize again for the abrupt ending, but there's plenty of time, God willing, and so we'll be back on Sunday for a few more chapters. But for now, thanks again for joining, Go and check out the Internal and External Considering series if you haven't seen it. I'd highly recommend it if you're interested in practical work. But for now, take care, look after yourselves, and I'll see you next time. Bye now.